Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is at the United Nations. He just addressed the Security Council, and he is now addressing the media. Let's listen in.
Office, he identified North Korea as the greatest threat to U.S. national security. And regrettably, 11 months later, not much has changed. If anything, the situation perhaps has worsened. I think in the wake, in particular, of the most recent North Korean missile test, a very dangerous test, one which was noted by others, actually, it was a real threat to civil aviation security, but again demonstrates the total disregard North Korea has, not just for the United States view on this, but for the view of the entire international community. And I think that was clearly expressed by the members of the Security Council today. We simply cannot continue to accept the progress of North Korea's program. We will maintain the pressure campaign, and in fact, we undertake efforts to increase the effectiveness of the pressure campaign, both through a combination of the sanctions regime, full implementation and compliance with the sanction regime, as well as unilateral actions on the part of many, many countries to send the message to North Korea through diplomatic steps as well as economic steps that we do not accept the pathway you're on. We hope that this pressure campaign will cause North Korea to alter its course, re-examine whether this truly is going to lead to a more secure, more security for the regime, and whether it is possible for them to even sustain an economy if they continue the path they're on. We're going to continue our diplomatic efforts. Those options remain open until other things may foreclose the diplomatic option. And with that, I'll stop there, and I think we can take a couple of questions, perhaps.
Thank you, Secretary Tillerson. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. We have heard a lot from you this morning about North Korea. I'd like to ask you about Myanmar. As you're aware, earlier this week, 2 Reuters journalists were arrested and their whereabouts are unknown. What is the US government doing to pressure Myanmar for their release? And is the US considering further sanctions on Myanmar over human rights abuses?
Well, our local representatives at the mission in Myanmar, at the embassy, are expressing our concerns over the detention of individuals, demanding their immediate release or information as to the circumstances around their disappearance. We are continuing to examine the circumstances around all of the events since the August attacks that have led to the enormous migration of people out of Myanmar. And have already identified one individual, and we are examining other possible individuals to hold responsible for targeted sanctions from the U.S.
How important is a free press in Myanmar? How important is a free press in Myanmar?
Well, a free press is vital to Myanmar's transition and becoming a viable democracy, and we want Myanmar's democracy to succeed. We know it is a process that they need to work through. This particular crisis is a real test of whether they are going to be able to affect a successful journey to democracy.
Mr. Secretary, you previously said that a precondition to talks with North Korea is the regime agreeing to give up its nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities. On Tuesday, you said that wasn't realistic. And today, you didn't mention the issue at all, despite what was in your prepared remarks. Does it remain a precondition for the United States? And are you and President Trump on the same page on whether and when to engage in talks?
The President's policy on North Korea is quite clear, and there's no daylight at all between the President's policy and the pursuit of that policy. And the President, I think, has been very clear that we are going to lead this pressure campaign. We're going to unite the international community, and we're going to keep the pressure as much as we can and increase it where possible. Most recently, the President called President Xi personally and asked him for China to cut the oil supplies off to North Korea to increase this pressure. That is intended to lead to diplomatic talks. In the meantime, the President's been very clear. Militarily, we are going to be prepared should something go wrong, and our military is prepared. With respect to the talks, we are not going to accept preconditions. You heard others have called for freeze for freeze. We do not accept a freeze for freeze as a precondition to talks. We do not accept any relaxing of the sanctions regime as a precondition of talks. We do not accept the resumption of humanitarian assistance as a precondition of talks. So we are not going to accept preconditions for these talks. But as I indicated in my remarks, our communication channels remain open North Korea knows they're open. They know where the door is. They know where to walk through that door when they want to talk. Thank you.
So we've just been listening to Rex Tillerson. He spoke at the United Nations at the Security Council talking about North Korea. And it's rather interesting because not too long ago, Rex Tillerson surprised many when he said that he was open to a diplomatic conversation with North Korea and did not require the precondition that North Korea halt its nuclear program. And then shortly after that, the White House kind of reacted to that statement, saying that the White House's policy in regards to North Korea has not changed at all. And now we hear that he spoke in front of the United Nations Security Council, and he seems to be sort of flipping back closer to the White House's official policy in regards to North Korea. He said to the Security Council, according to reports, that North Korea has to earn its way back to the negotiating table, and that sustained cessation of North Korean threatening behavior must occur before talks can begin. And he was asked outright whether or not the precondition of North Korea scaling back its nuclear program and its nuclear ambition was required before any sort of diplomatic avenue was pursued, and he sort of skirted the question. He said that the U.S. was not going to deal in preconditions. The U.S. was not going to consider freeze for freeze, meaning that North Korea freeze their nuclear program and South Korea and the U.S. freeze their war games, essentially, that they engage in just outside of North Korea. And he said that there would be no relaxing of sanctions either. He did not talk about whether or not the U.S. would demand that North Korea stop its pursuit of nuclear weapons before opening diplomatic channels. He also talked about putting pressure on China to open a dialogue and to put increased pressure on North Korea to help them come to the table and talk. It's a lot of stuff going on. So we're going to cover all the latest stories and have analysis of what Rex Tillerson had to say. So keep streaming CBSN.